Hi, and welcome back to another episode of On Location with Bowen and Mimi. Today, we're so lucky to sit down with Emily Cole. Emily grew up on a farm in central Alberta, and during university went on a life-changing river trip that really inspired her future work as a river guide. That has taken her to some amazing places, including, and I want to say this correctly, is it the Nahanni River?
Nahanni, yeah.
Yeah, from the Nahanni River to Alaska, and I also want to pronounce that
Wrangell,
Alaska, where she guided youth at risk for 50 days in the wilderness, which I'm excited to hear the stories about that adventure.
Lots of stories.
Lots of stories. Emily is currently living in Revelstoke, BC, and is continuing to guide for Elements Adventure Company. Emily, you are also doing your master's in counseling, very busy lady, and you've recently combined your love of outdoor exploration with inner exploration.
Yes.
And you've launched Wilderness Within counseling.
Yeah, Wild Within Coaching.
Wild Within Coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. So welcome and thanks for sitting down with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. Growing up on a farm in Alberta. Can you tell us about what that was like for you?
Yeah, in my opinion, it was wonderful. I couldn't ask for any better upbringing and the freedom to explore and to try different things and get to work on a lot of different projects. And I think I really view like my parents were like kind of yes people, and somehow our requests tailored into what they had. I think, it was things like, oh, I really like a dresser for my room here. But, oh, well, why don't we just go see what we have in the antique storage kind of, and oh, we could pull this out and we could touch it up. What color would you like? And it was just always this kind of engaging, we had projects on the go all the time and we were involved in them. Like, I think I really learned a lot about, I really, really valued, life and work being kind of one and the same, because we stepped out our door and there was our work and we were all involved, driving vehicles at the least. And
probably when you were 12?
At least, probably
right,
even,
don't farm
even
kids
younger. As soon as
really.
you could reach the pedals, you had a job to do.
That's right, yeah. What kind of farm was it?
It's a grain farm.
Okay. Yeah, and did you have animals as well, or
just pets?
Okay.
Which was very important, but not a part of our livelihood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The land itself, if you could describe what the farm was like.
Yeah, central Alberta, so it's fairly flat, but our home quarter and a couple of our fields that we owned alongside it as well kind of went right up to what we called our wood lot, which was a creek kind of next to a valley. So the height of land in the area was very close to us. So we had that little bit of variety. And my dad really valued kind of low impact farming, so trying to have practices that really worked with the land and a crop rotation that did as well. So that was always kind of there as well, of, how do we work with this place rather than against it. And then our yard was very established and had, quite a nice little bit of trees and things. So there was a lot of room to just go and roam, and some of that was kind of the rolling grasslands in the back, and other places were the trees, and we had a little bit of a dugout. And, in a lot of ways it's all very, very simple, and, it's not Rogers Pass and, these Mount Bagby of Revelstoke or anything, but it's kind of all you need in a lot of ways, where you can just kind of wander out and look at things and make up games and play with your dog and just have the freedom that you could do anything in that little area of land.
Yeah, no, it sounds idyllic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bowen had a very different upbringing. Bowen's my son. But I'm just remembering about Farley Mowat books. And when you were small, I don't know if you remember Farley Mowat. I think Lost in the Barrens was one that we loved to read together. But yeah, so you have a love of books. I'm just wondering if that also you would, be reading at a young age, and what kind of books you were interested in.
At a young age, I had a very hard time making it past a couple pages of a book. Really liked to be out on the go and played a lot of sports, and my parents very much encouraged it, and I really liked the idea of it. I'm like, okay, this time I got a book for Christmas and I'm going to sit down and read it, and I'd read 2 or 3 pages, be like, yep, that's good for now, and I can go outside or whatever. So I do like, exploring. I think the books I got the most into when I was young there was kind of this series, I don't know what it was, that my mom had found for me that was kind of, different stories of kind of like young girls. Like, again, my memory of it was that they were kind of in an adventure, like it was kind of frontier young girls, or I would have read like Little House on the Prairie as well. I think that's probably what I actually made it the furthest in of series and things. And
and friendships, would you have friends that live close by on other farms, or what was that like?
Yeah, so I think my best friend lived like 6 miles away or something like that. We rode on the bus together, and unfortunately I was at the beginning, so we rode for about an hour in the morning, and they were kind of at the end and rode for an hour in the evening. But that was just part of our life, was everybody rode the bus around the gravel roads and ended up at school and then stayed there because, nobody got to go home for lunch, or there were probably 2 town kids in my class that would walk home for lunch or something like that. But those were kind of the good friends. We had that farming town, New Norway, and then Camrose was about 20,000. So we kind of had town not too far away. And probably by the time I was about 12, I was playing on some fairly competitive sports teams.
What was your sport?
I was on a competitive jump rope team, and I ran a lot. Running was kind of my primary, and I played baseball and basketball. Kind of the small town, like you could play on every sports team, and they might really want you to because there might be only 10 girls that want to play basketball that year.
So on like a jump roper.
Yeah.
Okay, I've never met a jump roper before. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very, very cool niche sport that, of course, once you're in that world, it's got all of its things. And it kind of had 2 sides. It had the competitive side that was in some ways fairly intense and stressful because you're basically trying to be perfect, because if you stop your rope, which is very easy to do, that was a big dock in points. If you're doing a speed event, you can imagine you're jumping so fast that then it stops, you're losing a lot of points. Yeah. And if it's a trick event, you really cut the flow. So you're kind of trying to be perfect. But we would also do a lot of shows, like halftime shows at basketball games, and we worked with the Heart and Stroke Foundation a lot. So we do these shows, and people just have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
So like I've face planted. I literally like tied my rope around my feet by accident and like fell on the ground and was like, whoops, oopsies, this is gonna take a minute to untie my feet and get up and jump. And everybody's still just like, what? Like, what is going on? Yeah. So there was kind of these 2 sides where, we'd have like celebrity status in the performing side that people just had their minds blown, and on the competitive side, you're like, this is incredibly stressful. Otherwise, you can do whatever you want in a show, and it's cool.
Wow. And it is something you could do solo, but you can do it together in a team, right?
Yeah. So we had, solo events that were speed and what we call freestyle. And then we also had a small team. And so you'd do some things where you all had single ropes, but we're jumping the same, or in a relay, but then also double dutch and things like that. And then we had a really big group routine. And on our show part, we had kind of, a couple routines that everybody would just know. And so everybody that knows this one, go out and do it. And then the one person that doesn't, they'd come and start doing their freestyle while we got the double dutch ropes. And then you'd go in and just put this flowy show together where the floor is always busy, just doing a variety. We had a few different like show things that we would do too that weren't really involved in competition, but yeah.
Oh, that's unique. Interesting.
Is that something that you still air like once in a while, kind of like, I'm doing that today?
Yeah, once in a while. Like it kind of, it got to a point where I wasn't doing it as often. I got into university and I was busy with other things and traveling and guiding, and then it's hard to like stay consistent. So you kind of hit one of those plateaus where you're like, well, the muscle memory is there and I can do the same things, but I just not sticking with it enough to do anything new. And so I'll pull, do it once in a while as kind of a party trick almost. But now it really hurts my feet. Like, I don't know why, but my feet will get
Fast
really, really
footwork,
sore.
I guess,
So it doesn't last very long. And then I remember it for days when I'm like, I can hardly walk. Like my feet muscles aren't used to it or something. It's kind of random.
Oh, funny. Is it a prairie sport, do you think? Because I don't know. I've never heard of kids getting into that. Like I grew up in North Vancouver, but
I think it's one of those sports where it's kind of so unique that it starts wherever there's someone to coach it. So if I move somewhere and say I want to start a jump rope team, then Revelstoke would have a jump rope team, and there'd be 5 other teams in BC. So in Alberta, there was probably about 5 strong teams at a time. So we traveled northern Alberta for the one team and southern Alberta, and they'd come to central. But then the real competition was once you got up to the national level. Then there's some fairly competitive teams in Ontario and Quebec, and there is at least back in my day, there was a really good team out of Abbotsford BC. So there was kind of sometimes not a lot going on until you were like, whoa, now we're at nationals, and there's a few really strong teams. So we actually traveled down to the States to go to a camp, and then made some connections, and we'd bring a couple guys up to do a camp with us, because you get to a point where you're kind of just eventually making it up. And so if you run out of ideas or you don't know what drills to do, you're kind of like, here we are, and somebody else is like, well, have you thought about putting those two tricks together? And you're like, wow.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. And
are you doing it to music sometimes as well?
Yeah,
Usually,
the events that have tricks are to music, and that's definitely a part of it, like your musical interpretation. So it's almost like dancing and like strength training at the same time, because you're kind of, there is that part where you need to smile and have good posture and really like kind of engage with the music and the audience and stuff. But then you're also like doing handstands and flips and like triple unders and quadruple unders, and I would come out of my 75 seconds of freestyle routine being like shaking and barely able to stand up, and you're like, I cannot think of a harder workout than that. And that was the goal, was to make so that your routine would be as hard as you could do consistently, so that you could get the highest difficulty rating, but you needed to not make mistakes, the best that you could, and that was the goal. So you would come out of it shaking and
Incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Having
didn't
smiled
realize
the whole time.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, high performance. I didn't realize that we were going to be talking about, jump roping.
Yeah.
I mean,
Fascinating.
it's great. It's interesting to learn about.
That's what I love about doing this, is that like you get these little glimpses into worlds that you kind of like you never would have been a part of, or never would have had the experience to kind of go into. It's really cool. I'm wondering, like, because obviously it seems like you had like a really great childhood growing up on the farm and you really loved it, and I'm wondering if there was any point when you were getting older that you kind of like you had that kind of pull, like, man, I want to go explore the big city, or I want to go here, or was like, did you always kind of like, no, this is the perfect life? Like,
I think I even from a young age never been drawn to the city. We'd do trips. It was about an hour to get to Edmonton, and so we would have a day. We'd do a day trip up to the city, and who wants to do what, and make this plan and do some shopping, and sometimes go do an event or something like that. And like I remember, and eventually we were old enough, you could stay home if you didn't want to come, or whatever, and be like, I just go and spend a bunch of money I don't need to, and whatever, and just really, really loved being on the farm. But I also think I always had this draw to explore. Not that I wanted to move to the city, but that I really wanted to travel. I really wanted to fly on a plane. Like I couldn't wait until the first time. My parents both actually grew up around that area on farms, and they met kind of at the local college. You could only do 2 years at the time, and then had to go up to U of A in Edmonton to finish your degree. But then my dad went out to Ontario for grad school and came home one summer, married my mom, and brought her out. And then which he had been a cowboy that thought Saskatchewan was too far away at one point, and then was out in Ontario, and they moved up to Yellowknife like in the 80s. And I think, it's like the idea of being up north, especially back then when, the bridge wasn't into Yellowknife, so you were actually locked in for a couple months a year. You could only fly in and out. That there's kind of that real sense of adventure that was kind of a part of our family history, of just curiosity kind of leading to opportunities, and having the courage to follow those opportunities. That always, I always wanted to go up north, and I always wanted to fly on a plane and go explore different areas. So yeah, I think I feel at home more rurally and small town. Like even, Revie is nice small town. Sometimes it feels too big, but that access to be able to just walk out your door and explore, but then also that draw to like, go get on a plane and go see somewhere else too.
I'm just dreaming now of these wild places. Like when you say Northwest Territories, I mean, many people have never had a chance to explore some of the places you've been to.
Yeah.
Do your parents still have this farm?
Yes. My mom passed away just over a decade ago, and my dad still lives on the farm. He's been renting out his land for, I don't know, it's probably been about 8 years or something like that, and just now started to sell some of the land. None of us kids are wanting to take over the farm. As much as I love it, I don't really want to be a commercial farmer. So, he still lives there. He'll be in a zone of transition at some point, I think,
Mm-hmm.
in the near future, or just figuring out, kind of recommitting to that being his place and it looking a bit different. But
Mm-hmm.
I think for him, he's got such a tie to that land and the way that he farmed it so well,
Mm-hmm.
which is not common. There's a lot of people that are willing to go more for profit, and their crop rotations don't support in the same way that I think it's hard to be there and watch someone else farm your land.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're there, you want to be farming it or having a say, and if you don't have that, you kind of want to go somewhere else where the surroundings don't mean so much to you. So
Yeah.
that's still kind of one of my homes as well, is to go back there, and that area still exists, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe not for long.
Yeah. Transitions. So
Mhm.
you did transition to university, and
Mhm.
I didn't catch which university you went to or what you were
Yeah,
studying.
I went to Augustana, which is a small faculty of the U of A in Camrose, so I was able to live at home on the farm and just commute into town to go to school and save a bunch of money so that I could go traveling in the summer. And yeah, that kind of, I think that passion for kind of sports and athletics eventually kind of transitioned into outdoor athletics in some way. If I'd go hiking and I was like, I don't have shin splints for the first time in a long time, but I still feel fit, and I still have community. Like, that kind of got to be my friend group rather than the jump rope team being my best friends. It was kind of the paddlers became my best friends in university. So it was quite a big switch, and it was still a small school, but it was much bigger than my high school. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, my high school friends were really great, but also now I have friends that are really great, and we even have more interests in common, more than just that we live in the same area. So
Right.
yeah, that was quite a big transition in some ways.
Yeah. And the 5-day life-changing, I
Mhm.
say life-changing because it really sounds like it sort of, pushed you towards this
Mhm.
love of guiding and exploration. Was that organized through the university and this group of friends? And
Yeah, and so kind of how it happened was, in high school, small school, so you took your 3 sciences, math and social and English, and then probably phys ed, and that was fine, and you needed to keep your options open, and then when I got to university, I was like, okay, I did that, I kept my options open, and now, especially that I'm paying for it, I would just want to take what I want to take, and I really like gym class, so how much phys ed can I take? And it was a very small school, so phys ed was there was only about 200 or 300 level phys ed classes. That's it. I got to take like 7 other classes, and the advisor said, well, there is one other one, you don't need to take it because you're a kinesiology major. The phys ed had 2 different streams, but the only other class is phys ed, and you can take it if you want, but you don't have to. Or sorry, outdoor ed of the phys ed classes. And I was like, well, we went on a high school trip and went paddling for a day, and that was cool. This will probably be cool too, and I want more phys ed, so I'll take that. And yeah, so that kind of just was a step into a world that I didn't really know very much about. And part of that intro to outdoor ed class in my first term of university was this 5-day canoe trip that, yeah, kind of blew my mind in a way. Like, I really remember going down the river, all these canoes, and the campsites we had were fairly wild. Like, we used them every year, but they weren't established in any way. So, they felt very wild, having never camped like that before. And yeah, so I remember just at some point floating down this river and being like, you guys, like, do you realize, like we could stop there. We could stop there. We're going to treat water out of the river. We have the food in our barrels. Like, we have everything we need, and we can kind of go wherever we want. This is amazing. And it's cool too when that course would have everyone from 1st to 5th years, people that are really keen, or people that end up in their 5th year that have credits they just need to fill. So they're like, I finally, completed all the things of my major, and now I just need 10 more credits. So I'm taking outdoor ed and philosophy and whatever else. That it was a really, really interesting group of people that got to just kind of come into the group. And now you've got this group of young 20-year-olds that are singing songs around the fire. Like, we're trying to sing songs on the river and we can't remember anything but the chorus. And, and playing these silly games that are like from camp, but we're having such a good time. And I think, especially as time goes on, that becomes more and more rare as people get glued to their phones and also, separated from each other. They're not living in community. They're not getting together to just hang out and play games and have conversations and things like that. So it was a very, very special, very special time. that kind of just, yeah, then a group of those people were going to go on the next course, and that was more skills based in the spring, and then that led to the opportunity to volunteer to help lead that intro course, and then that led to a little bit of paid position in the summer, which led to another connection, and the doors just kind of kept opening, and I kept walking through them.
Right.
This is kind of how it all unfolded.
So did some of these other friends who participated in that also become guides?
Yeah, a few. Like, because it was only a stream of a major, you know, it was a fairly small part of the program. So a small school with a small major with a small stream. So there was kind of, after a year or two, there was about 3 of us that kind of felt like the 3 musketeers that just said yes to everything. You know, so we worked a lot together. I think they were a year ahead of me, so sometimes we didn't end up on the same trips all the time, but we bought canoes at the same time, so we could go, you know, day trip to Canmore and paddle and things like that. And then all of us ended up working up on the Nahanni at some point, and everybody kind of went a little bit their different way. One guy's, you know, became a ski guide, and one of the girls is from Saskatchewan, so she runs a lot of their cattle farming in the winter and still goes up and guides a trip or 2 on the Nahanni, and I kind of went more the therapeutic direction. So it was cool after a while too to get to see, you know, the outdoor world can seem like a niche from the outside, and then like anything, once you're in that world, you're like, oh, there's actually all these little niches of
Specialties
within that world, how you can specialize or make it a part of your bigger lifestyle. Or
I think it's too bad that like the outdoor world would be considered like a niche nowadays. Like I feel like that should just be a huge part of everyone's life. I don't know. Anytime I get to, I try to spend at least like a couple hours out, just like every day, just to sit and just to be. And it's like when you get to, especially when you get to go on those huge camping trips where you're out with your buddies, and it's just like, yeah, it's too bad that's kind of been lost. Maybe lost isn't the right word, but yeah, I don't know. There's nothing like there's like a certain kind of feeling you get when you're doing that you just can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think it feels like it, you know, it's still valued and it's still something people want to do, but it just is not the priority as much. It's everyone's busy and we're working, and you know, all of these things, that it takes a lot of time and effort to get out there. Once you're out there, it's wonderful, but you know, doing the food prep and the gear, and if you need to get some new skills, and you have to organize the logistics and all of these things for like a weekend, and then you have to go back to work on Monday. That for a lot of people, like it's hard to do that upfront work to get to the thing that they would love to do. And it's easy to like, oh, I should go out for a walk. Well, I just clean the kitchen first, and I'll send these emails first, and then the sunset, and you missed it again for a day. And it happens to all of us. It happens to me too.
Sure.
Which is why it's lovely to have it as part of my job, because then it for sure happens. But yeah, it is kind of too bad that yeah, I feel like it's a function of our busy lives that we lose that connection to place, connection to nature, connection to each other, start prioritizing other things over it.
I'm just thinking about something I heard on the news the other day on the North Saskatchewan River, which is the river where you did that initial 5-day canoe. And there was a family of 5 who were just on the bank of the river on a piece of ice, and the ice broke away. I don't know if you heard about that.
No, I didn't.
They were rescued. They were all okay, but there were some fun images of this family just unexpectedly having a float for 7 kilometers down the North Saskatchewan River. Yeah, a couple days ago it happened.
Yeah, and I mean, that kind of brings up the other side of it, of the risk of doing things. And, you know, I remember someone famous has a quote, I don't know what it was or who it was, but something of like, you know, it's like, oh, those outdoor pursuits can seem risky, but the greater risk is not going, or the greater risk is staying the same or something. But they can look like, you know, it's like you hear about, you know, somebody falls in the river from ice, but you don't hear about all the other people that safely manage their way around it. Or you hear about the avalanche and you don't hear about how many people went skiing in avalanche territory and lived to tell the tale. And there's all these risks that, you know, are there. They're inherent to the activities, and they can be a real deterrent. Sometimes they should be, because people don't have the skills, but it's also something that is really worth our time and attention to learn how to manage those risks and be able to go out there as safely as possible because of the value that's there for us.
Last year, there was a documentary touring the scene of a Canadian woman who paddled all the waterways in Canada.
Okay.
I don't know if you saw that movie. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was incredible, but we'll look it up for you. I was
Okay,
just wondering,
great.
that kind of a trip. I think she wanted it to take a couple years, and it ended up taking her 6 years.
Mhm.
And does that kind of an adventure inspire you? Do you want to do something like that, or?
I think, it inspires me. I think what I keep coming back to is like I really, really love guiding, like more than I love personal trips or getting to do my own thing. And, and an adventure like that, it's really hard to find other people that have the time and the desire to like, yes, for the next 6 years, I'd like to dedicate all my free time and resources to paddling waterways. I think I love being out there with people and getting to kind of like take them, the things that seem scary, we can kind of work through it and like, release a lot of that fear and see that we can work with the elements and manage a lot of risk. And the people that don't have time, or they've got other responsibilities, that don't have time to do the prep, like I can do that and I can bring us out there. And that's kind of what I love the most. I keep coming back to how much I really love taking other people out there. And
Right. Maybe at this time, then you could tell us a little bit about this time in Alaska, because that is quite interesting.
Yeah. So I worked for a company called Alaska Crossings, and we took at-risk youth is kind of the most general term. So kids with some level of behavioral challenge. They had to have some type of diagnosis, and they had to voluntarily come and be between 12 and 18 and residents of Alaska. And that was kind of the very basic of who we took out. And we were based out of Wrangell, which is down on the Panhandle, Southeast Alaska, in the rainforest on an island. And we ran, the model changed a couple times, but either 48-day or 63-day trips, mostly ocean canoeing. We'd use the Lower Stikine River is there sometimes. So if that fit, we would use that. And we'd do a little bit of hiking, but mostly we're on a long paddling expedition. And the kids would all fly into town, and we'd kind of do our intake process and get them changed over into the gear they needed. And we would go out, and if everything was going well, we stayed out. If somebody needed to come in and go to the doctor, or even, if they were in a remote village and that didn't have a dentist, and we could get them into the dentist while they were there, things like that, we could make them work. But mostly we stayed out there, and we saw a jet boat every 1 to 2 weeks that brought us food and whatever else we needed. We needed to write paperwork and stuff for our documentation, so it'd bring us batteries and
Right. I was curious about
things
that
like that.
aspect. When you're guiding, you do have a team of people who are supporting you. And so as a guide, what are your responsibilities?
Yeah, we have like a huge amount of responsibility, and a lot of them that we maybe don't have to act on. It's like if I'm out there guiding and someone has a major medical, like I'm responsible. I'm the closest thing they have to a doctor. And some of that responsibility is using my first aid training, and it's also knowing how and when to call for an evac, and be able to evacuate that person into higher medical care. So it's their health and safety, wellness, like the day-to-day wellness too, of helping people. Anybody need a layer break? Are you sure you don't need a layer break? Like really, really working with people to take care of themselves and stay hydrated. We're in charge of the cooking. We might not do all of it, but we're in charge of making sure it happens well.
Okay.
And the paddling safety, setting up tarps. Like people kind of, ideally are able to mostly take care of themselves, set up their own tent, manage their own layers.
Yeah, I was thinking
things
with,
like that.
with these kids, especially, you'd think that would be a part of including them in that.
Yeah, and so kind of back to Alaska more so. We really, really work to, empower the youth we were working with. So on that program, everybody had their own individual tarp. So in the first couple days, we did a lot of teaching on the basics. And then your first, say, 10-day expedition was really taking the time it took to teach the skills. So go over the knots again and, go around and work with them to, hey, I just noticed this corner of your tarp is a little bit saggy. Like if we pull it out to this angle, it'll be tighter and the rain will come off of it. And helping them to learn those skills, so then they could set up their own tarp. And then they're like, look, I made my own
did
tarp
it.
this time. And oh, I really like it when it's, it's got a little root so I don't roll out from under. And then they could kind of really own their zone and, they start to feel pretty proud about it and really see, these are often kids that it's the kid that has a tough time sitting in the classroom. So they're kind of getting these messages, they're not good enough and they're not smart enough, and they start to feel like they can't do anything, and they go home and they can't do anything right, and maybe even in their friend group, and then they're kind of like, hey, I did something, and you're like, dude, you did something, like you did it and you did it really great, and looking for those places where you can celebrate. So when I think about that program, at least the way I tried to approach it, at first we're teaching a bunch, and then we're kind of teaching experientially. So we're out on an expedition, but we're taking the time to correct strokes so that people can paddle and not be super tired, and work with them to set up their tarps and go around and do chores. We need to collect firewood and water and cook dinner and tie up the boats, and all these responsibilities that we could really involve the kids in. And then to kind of give them more and more opportunity, like as a reward rather than a punishment. Like, hey man, like, you guys are really doing great. Like, do you want to cook dinner tonight and I'll help you? Like, I'll be your sous chef rather than you be mine. They're like, okay. And it's like, sweet. Like, getting to cook dinner is the reward for doing well. Like, winning for everyone. So I tried to work towards where it'd be maybe your last expedition where you're like, okay, you're each in charge for a day. Like, we had this thing we called voice of the day or leader of the day. So one of the kids would have a bit more responsibility. And maybe at first that just started with, before meals, we would do 30 seconds of silence. If you were religious, you wanted to pray or not, or just sit in silence, it was just a time where we could kind of like honor the day. So maybe that was the first responsibility. All you have to do is you say, everyone, please, prepare yourself for 30 seconds of silence. And when you think 30 seconds is about passed, you just say thank you, and then we go and eat. Maybe that's all the responsibility to start with. Gradually increasing it towards the end where we'd say, okay, you're going to be in charge. So you can come down with us guides in the morning, and if you want, you can have a cup of coffee with us or hot chocolate. It's your choice. You get to have a hot drink. And then we need to go over the route, and we need to pick paddling partners, and we need to look at the chore rotation. And, maybe there's a couple other things we need to do in the day, and to try and get the kids to we usually did group in the evening, it varied a lot. Sometimes it was therapeutic, or it was a story and we'd discuss it, or it was a team building activity, and we'd try and work them up to leading group. And every kid's different. So one kid might be like, yep, I got it, and they go for it. And another kid is like, can barely talk in front of people. So maybe their leadership is they pass the paper to me and I read it for them. And then I pass them back, and maybe all they ever say is thank you at the end, and they led group. So kind of working it up to like, yeah, you guys led this expedition. Of course, we're doing a ton in the background, and we're ultimately in charge, and we're communicating with the office, and we're writing a bunch of paperwork, but really trying to give them this opportunity to really own their experience and feel powerful and take on responsibility, and see that they can do things, and that they can go back home afterwards and find places where they can have mentorship, and they can have good relationships, and they can help out at home, and they can work with their parents rather than against them, maybe, and their siblings and their community members. So
some of the same values as the Vernon Community School, it sounds like. Yeah. Taking it up. Yeah.
Nice.
How long did you do that for?
Yeah, I was there for 5 years, and in a typical year, like, we had staff training for the whole month of March, so I'd be up there for March, and then I usually worked, maybe a program starting in the spring for, if it was when we were doing the 63-day model, you worked like half of it. So you say you worked about a month. And if we were doing the 50-day model, you could work the whole thing, which was really magical to bring kids start to finish. So I would typically work, maybe like a shift, 30 to 50 days in the spring, and maybe a little bit of something. Sometimes I bounced around to just kind of infield support or infield training in the summer. Especially as I kind of got up in experience, you could kind of go in and do a bit of coaching to kind of help the guide team, because it was a wildly challenging job. And then I usually worked a program like November, December, kind of right before Christmas. And I'd have usually a good time to chunk off like September, October, and maybe go do a little bit of river stuff in the summer. But yeah, you kind of worked weeks or months on, and then you had weeks or months off. So there was room to go and do personal trips, or go catch up with your family members and things like that.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
Well, just it's got to be really like rewarding experience to be able to kind of do that and give back, and you're still doing something you love, but you're helping these, you know, these kids who might not have had that opportunity. And like, was there was there ever any kind of like drama on those trips? I mean, I imagine there must have been. And like, how did you kind of how would you handle that aspect of it?
Yeah, you could kind of say like drama or something of that nature was our business.
Yeah.
Like, we had very, very high risk management policies because, you know, we took 9 kids that have been kicked out of school and we put them all together. Like, the point is that they can work out their patterns. So we've, you know, sometimes had kids fighting and running away. That was kind of like the extreme part of it, or threatening or whatever. But on a daily basis, you could expect, you know, yeah, somebody's going to kind of mouth off at somebody else, and maybe even somebody refuses and we don't leave the beach that day, or somebody refuses to paddle, or, you know, whatever, especially kind of in the beginning to middle, where the beginning was a lot of kind of, it felt like you're really working uphill to kind of get things going. And of course, nobody knows each other, nobody trusts each other. And that's actually a really sacred thing, to trust each other, that we kind of take for granted until it's really been hurt.
And that takes time.
It takes time. So once we kind of got to the middle, you know, as a head guide there, I'd kind of, you know, I'd make my plan. Here's our route and our mileage, and here's where I think we'll stop for lunch, and here's the paddling partners and the chore rotation and what I think we'll do for group tonight. And all this could change. And then I'd kind of go through and like look at where I thought it might go off the rails. Like, oh, these 2 guys maybe don't really like paddling together, but, you know, we're specifically working with them about working together. So that might not go so well. And if that really can't go well, like maybe we could switch it here. And well, this kid just really hates firewood duty, and he's on firewood duty. So we'll see what happens there. And, you know, this kid got a tough letter from home yesterday, and so kind of like, okay, kind of got that in the back of my mind of here's where I think it'll go off, and I've kind of got some contingency plans, and yet somehow we end up like over in left field. You're like, wow, I really didn't see that one coming. Like, yeah, so we had a lot. And I think, you know, your strategy for working with something like that, where it's like we have such a human tendency that we want to do well, we maybe even want to be perfect, and now you're working in a job where like there's no chance, like it's not going to be perfect, and you're working to be able to accept that. So then kind of on the flip side, you're kind of like, okay, well, great, well, now I get to totally let go of things being perfect, and I get to just work with what is. And and yeah, your strategy for that. And sometimes it was hard on you, like you just really felt like you needed a win, or there's friction in the guide team, which can totally happen, and the weather's really tough, or you're working through something personally, or you get bad news from home, or something that you can't really call in sick because there's you don't get to stay home. But you know, we did have a team that would support us as best they could. But I think the best strategy that I had at one point, where I was going through probably the start of some burnout, where things were starting to get a bit harder, and we were a little bit short-staffed too, and we had kind of a tough program. But somewhere I had gotten the mantra. I'm sure I had kind of gotten these questions or this mantra from someone else, or the support of someone else. But I had a couple questions I would reflect on every day. And one was, what went well today and why? Which is really, really cool. Like, your life's in chaos and you look for something that went well, but then you also ask why. And you can usually see something that you did. So even if you think you screwed everything up, you can see something that went well and somehow that you contributed to it that can give you a bit of forward momentum. And the other one was, what can I learn from today? Which it's like, that turns everything into a rich experience, you know? And I remember a really great day where we were really struggling. Like, it was really hard for us to get kind of this forward momentum with the group. And that looked like a lot of refusals. And we had some kids that were running away. And it was hard for us as staff that came in halfway through to get buy-in with the group. So we had a day where it was kind of building up to this, and one kid just refused. And I had the rest of the group, and and we took down our tarps and we loaded the boats, and then we were still waiting, so we did our journal exercise, and then we had lunch. And at some point, it's still just the refusal was still in process, and so at some point, it makes time to make the decision to unload the boats and set camp back up. And you can kind of work with these dynamics. To the group's frustrated, hear their their frustrations and figure out, you know, hey, we're all a team. So us being mad at that guy over there isn't actually helping us move forward. So what do we need to be able to welcome that guy back in the group? And it just gave us a lot of opportunity to address what had been going on for a long time, of the tensions in the group and the patterns that were coming out. And people are only doing what they know to do in conflict. So we ended up, we're still on the beach, and you could look at that, like, today on the basic level was a failure. Like, I didn't even move forward. We didn't even get our group off the beach. But when you look deeper than that and you say, what can I learn from this? What went well and why? You're like, today was incredibly rich, and it was actually a pivot point in our trip where we were able to have a big enough blow up that it brought patterns to light that we really needed to address. And then we could really move forward in a way that we had never been able to before. Yeah,
The mess.
There's one example.
Yes,
of
no, that's
hundreds
beautiful.
of days of.
It's usually in the mess, right, where a lot
Yes.
of the best gifts come. But we just don't like being messy, most of us humans. So, well, thank you for sharing that. Of the 5 years, there's a lot of different people that you met, a lot of different kids. I'm just wondering if there's one particular kid or name that just still is with you in your heart, that they really made a difference in your life.
Yeah, there's a handful. Yeah, there's a handful. The little story I could tell is, yeah, I was going through a phase where I was kind of like, I just need to know. I need a bit of proof that, you know, this hard work we're doing is working. And because it was a youth program, like, we couldn't really have contact with the kids afterwards, and they could contact us through the office, but there kind of needed to be this confidentiality and this separation. And I was kind of like, I totally get it, totally understand, it makes total sense, but just for my ability to keep doing this, like, I need to not just be pouring into a void right now. And so I had just kind of had that where I was kind of wrestling with it. I was like, this is kind of an unreasonable request. Like, I don't know that this can be filled, but I feel like I need proof. And the way the timing worked was we'd have our staff training in March, and then there wasn't a lot of work. Programs started kind of slowly in the spring, building to being really busy in May, June, and July. So there was a Alaska Folk Fest happened in Juneau shortly after our training. So we'd often take the ferry up to Juneau, and, you know, we're kind of in our first days off, but all of our friends are around, and so we'd often go up and have this, like, really, really nice time. Music everywhere. It's like every restaurant you walk into, someone's just jamming out on the mandolin, and really, really fun time. Very, very, like, traditional folk, like roots of folk. So the year before, I had been working in a girls program, and yeah, had some really lovely girls. And there was, you know, I just had one that I, like, just could not kind of get on my side. You're trying all these different strategies, you know, you try and be super nice, and that's not really working. So you're trying to be a little bit more, like, straightforward. That's not really working. Try and joke with them, and you try and, like, all these different things. You just kind of couldn't get in. And eventually I had a guide that came in just for a short amount of time to do a little bit of infield training with us. And I was saying this to him because he had a lot more wilderness therapy experience at a different program than I did. And he's like, dude, you don't get it? Like, this person is used to being, like, running kind of with the street boys and the skater boys and stuff. Like, she's used to being the alpha female, and you come in, you're just alphaing the heck out of her. Like, of course she doesn't like you. And I was like, oh, of course, like, that makes so much sense, that what she knows is being the one and only female, and of course she doesn't like me. It's kind of, it's like personal, but it's not personal. And so, you know, we kind of, at some point I'll just kind of have a chat with a kid, whether it's between me and them or them and someone else, and, like, listen, you don't have to like each other, you just got to respect each other and figure out how to work together. And just kind of, she was probably 17 or something. We're just going to have to figure out how to respect each other and work together. Even if we, like, you don't like me, that's fine. So we had kind of getting along, whatever. And she had ended up coming back to the program with, there's a few other logistics and whatever. And I ended up coming back to the program. I think they were short a guide. And so I jumped in just to fill in and was kind of like, hey, you're here. I'm here. How cool is that? Neither of us expected to be here. And there was kind of a different feeling to it because now she had chosen to come back. So things were a bit different. She had a bit different role. I had a bit different role. We somewhat bonded, but not really. Like, it was kind of like, okay, like, here we both are. We feel better about it, but we still maybe, like, we're not going to be good buddies or anything. But at the beginning, she had been quite hard on me. She really didn't like me. And the next year, we're up in Juneau at Folk Fest, and I had kind of this like, I really need some proof. So we're hanging out around town or something. Somebody's like, oh, I ran into so-and-so. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, how are they doing? Like, you wish all these kids the best.
Of
You know, they've
course.
had a hard time, even if they're not your little buddy. I was like, oh yeah, she's good. She'd really love to see everybody. So I told her, like, we're going to be at the main hall. She could come by. She's staying at a spot. She's kind of got a curfew. She's got to go home. But I said, we'd be here, and she's going to drop by and kind of see us. So there were some people she really, really liked. And because she'd been in the program for so long, she'd actually seen quite a few different guides. And yeah, so there's people she was really excited to see. And I was like, I'm excited to see her. Even if, I'm not expecting us to have a good chat. Like, I just kind of want to give her a high five, It's been a year. She's continued to do good work. She's in a different place than she was before. And so I went back, and just that she talked to me, that she had like a grown-up conversation where we kind of checked in with each other, and I asked her questions about, where she was living and what she was doing. And I was like, you didn't talk to me for the first 2 weeks of program, other than to kind of like, maybe call me a name under your breath or give me a little like, grimace face or something. I'm like, there it is. That's the proof I needed, that because of this program and other supports in her life as well, like, she's in a different place. She can talk to people she couldn't talk to before. She can carry on like a respectful conversation. And so that was a very special time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, deepening connections can happen when you have longer amounts of time to really dig in and chew on it all.
Yeah, I think that was the beauty of our program, was like we had time together to work through. You got 50 days. Another memory was there was a boy that really didn't like me, and that was fairly common, because I'd often, if I was in a boys program, I'd be the only female, because I'd have two male co-guides, and if the guy had any female related trauma, it usually came out to me. So it wasn't uncommon that I had to work with that. It was like day 37 or something like that. Like, dude says something nice to me, and I was like, breakthrough in the tree this morning. Like,
yes,
Bud's on my side, and he had, I don't know what you call the haircut, where you're kind of long on top, and he wearing a little ponytail
like
thing.
a faux mock, or I don't know.
Do you think it would look cool if my hair was braided? I was like, yeah, man. Like, would you braid my hair for me? And I was like, I would love to. Like, this is like remarkable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about how you would balance, your own wellness in these pretty intensive times that, like you said, 50 days, it's a long time. And you did have support, and you did have these breakthrough moments, but then you did have time after the program was done. It sounds like you had sometimes weeks or months, and I know that you've done some traveling. So would you find that that was your time for yourself to really, spend time getting to know yourself without all of that going on?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was kind of an interesting ebb and flow, because I really love journaling, so I often would journal. We didn't have a lot of time, but you're kind of like working through, you can kind of see these patterns when you're pushed, and then you had this time to do the things you love and catch up on rest. And it's amazing. You come out of the field and like you can barely choose what to eat for dinner. Like, you're just so deeply decision fatigued that you're kind of like, well, I must be a new version of myself on the other side of this. Like, I can barely tell which way is up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that freedom to, you just come out of having worked for months. Like, now you have time and money, and you get to have some choice that you can go and do what you need to do and explore the world, explore yourself, whether that's go back home and explore yourself, or go somewhere new, or do a wilderness trip of your own. But yeah, there was lots of time for that, and that was a really good space. Even it's like the flights in between. I thought that was almost like a sacred transition. It usually, just the way the flights worked out, you usually had to stay overnight, coming from Alberta anyways. And just to kind of slow things down, that it's like you have a flight, and then you have a night to yourself, and you have another flight, and maybe even take a layover day in Seattle or something like that, just to kind of really honor that transition back and forth, kind of between worlds. Like,
right. And I love how, you're just bringing attention to that. It can just be a car ride or a plane ride, or I'm even thinking about a book that I read about, I think it was The Tipping Point, actually, that it was just about professional athletes, and how, like, tennis players, for instance, they would take their shot and the ball would drop and they would turn away from the net and they would have from the net back to the place where they served. I don't know what that is, 30 seconds. But that was the time they needed to recover before they, went on. So, yeah. Ayurveda yoga, is that something that you added to your life when you were doing some traveling in India and Nepal? Did you pick that up when you were there? Or?
Yeah, I think the seed was planted. I went to Nepal after I finished university, and that was kind of the first, like, some of my friends are going abroad to paddle, and I don't quite want to organize that, and they're taking kayaks, and my canoe's bigger and whatever. But I was like, I would like to go abroad with the point of doing outdoor stuff, not just, backpacking through Southeast Asia or whatever. So I went to Nepal, and I actually ended up getting quite severe altitude sickness and having to quit on a trek earlier than I thought, and then needed to be pretty gentle, pretty low key for a while. And yeah, it was kind of like wandering around, doing a lot of reflecting, like a lot of just reading some really interesting articles and journaling a lot and stuff. And the town I was in, there was quite a bit of yoga going on, and kind of ended up being about a week of kind of retreat. And the first one was like an intro to yogic and, Buddhism and meditation. And then they had another one that was intro to yogic practice. So they were somewhat similar, like it was at the same center and things. So they had us do like the doshic quiz. So you can kind of do this, and it's your mind body type. And don't need to get too deep into the Ayurveda side, but that's kind of the basis of how they look at it, a lot of it, where it's based in the 5 elements, and each of those has properties like, is it hot or cold, dry or moist, like sharp or soft, like these type of things. And you can see that in our ways, like my mind is sharp or is it foggy, and my temper is hot or is it cold, and things like that. So Ayurveda is a lot of looking at balancing those things, either through our habits or our diet and things like that. But I didn't get it at the time. You did this quiz, and it was like, well, I don't know how to answer. Like, I don't know, am I a underweight or overweight? Is my nose normal or not normal? Like, I don't know yet if I can have children. I haven't tried. Like, I don't totally know how to do this quiz. Some of it's kind of obvious. It's like, do you have a lot of energy? Like, check mark. Yeah. Things like that. So it kind of comes out, and it gives you some data to work with, and you can kind of look at that mind body type and how to work with it, and how it typically goes out of balance and how to bring it back in. So I didn't really get it at the time, but it kind of planted a seed of interest. And then I did do yoga teacher training in India a few years later. It would have been like 2017 or 2018 or something like that. And again, I didn't invest too much in it, but there was kind of people around that were like, oh, you must be a this. And you're like, okay, like, tell me more. Like, I don't know what exactly that means. But it was, to me, I think it was an intriguing way to look at ourselves. And it was actually early days of COVID shutdown when I was like, at this point, this is kind of cool. Like, we're all just supposed to like do less and stay home right now. What an opportunity. I never stay home and do less. Like, and it's like, doing less. What would I like to learn? What projects would I like to take on? I think I also had a little bit of an injury. I was kind of babering, and I was like, sweet. I don't have to have FOMO. Everybody's out doing stuff. Like, everybody else has to stay home too. And that was the first thing that came up to my mind. I was like, I'd really like to understand this whole mind body type, what these doshas mean.
Sorry, where was home at this time for you?
This is it's a little random, but this was Grand Prairie, Alberta. I had quit my job in Alaska, and as I was kind of, that was a big deal. Like, that was a lot. That was really my pinnacle of purposeful work in my community, and I was burnt out, and I needed to take a break, and had kind of learned what I could learn and offered what I could offer, and it gets to be that balance is off a bit. So it was time for me to move in a different direction, and been like, well, maybe this is the time to try living up north, and was starting to think about grad school and think about, well, if I'm going to pursue, say, a master's of social work, maybe I should get some different social work experience than just working in this one program. And one of my good friends lived in Grand Prairie, and she said, well, there's lots of opportunity here, and this is pretty far north. And when I looked it up, I was like, well, actually, the job I think might be what I'm shooting for is kind of here. It was running a day program for at-risk youth, which turned out not to be the answer to burnout, trying to run a program like that on my own. But
so it was familiar.
That's kind of, you do what you know, which is to keep doing until you can't.
Yeah.
So I was living in Grand Prairie, and yeah, it just started with looking up podcast and kind of finding this lady that I really appreciated the way she broke things down in kind of a simple manner. Because Ayurveda can feel really complex and like it's a whole system. You can basically be a doctor of that, working with people. So to kind of break it down and led into taking one of her coaching programs. And at some point I was like, I don't actually get this. I really need to deep dive into what this means. And I think this is what has stuck with me is it's based in the elements and their properties. And that makes sense to me, you know, of space, wind, fire, water, earth. You're like, okay, yeah, earth and water is heavy. I understand. Like air is light. So that's where that kind of started and somewhat continues. I'm not pursuing that direction near as much anymore, but that was kind of the start of that. And I do enjoy incorporating it a little bit, and I value that lens, even if I still feel very much like an amateur of it. But like so many things, you know, you learn what you can and kind of take what serves you and kind of build on that into integrating it into the rest of your practice and your life.
At what point did you end up in Revelstoke? I think it's a couple times that you've lived in Revelstoke now.
Yeah, it's been, you know, at least a loose orientation towards that being my home for the last 5 years, pretty much. And that was also kind of post-Alaska, you know, kind of ended up in this, the world was different. 2020, things were kind of shut down, but kind of not really. We didn't know what was going on yet. And I didn't have guide work for that summer because things had been shut down. And I was like, well, I think I'd like to go paddling then for myself. So it kind of drifted out to BC, visiting some friends, and came with my boat and my bikes, and, you know, was moving around and doing kind of whatever came up and really enjoying kind of that freedom for a time. And that was when I was taking some coaching courses. So kind of being in service enough to take my coaching courses and practice with my kind of peer clients and then be out of service and exploring beautiful BC. And I think the balance of those two, you know, I could have just gone to the wilderness, but I'd be like, well, I think this coaching thing is really cool. And I'm investing quite a lot in these courses. So I kind of need an office. Maybe I don't really feel like I need a home and a bed, but I need an office to kind of like work at these things. So it was kind of time to stabilize a little bit. And I'd kind of swapped with a friend. She got some river work. So I took over her cabin down near Nelson. And as that was finishing at the end of summer, it's like, well, Nelson seems good. You know, I'll just look for a home here for the winter. I want to ski more. I hadn't skied all that much yet. And I just couldn't get in. Like I'd be talking to somebody about a rental and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to get in my car now and come look at it. Like, oh, it's gone. I'd be like, why couldn't you just tell me I'm like 50th on the list and I'm not going to get in? And at the same time, through a friend of a friend, somebody I didn't know in Revelstoke, but I had kind of a mutual connection with, was looking to fill a big house downtown and kind of looking to fill it with non-strangers, like some level of reference. And I was like, oh, I don't know about Revy. It seems kind of hardcore.
Really? More so than Nelson?
I don't know. It was like, and it's such a kind of a silly judgment, but it just kind of had this vibe to it that it's like, you know, the mountain's pretty steep, so everybody's hucking cliffs and hitting jumps and whatever. And some kind of a side story that kind of, I was like, well, I'll stop in and take a look at the house, or, you know, let's meet and have tea. And so she showed me around as this big kind of beautiful older house right in downtown, and we had a tea. And she's actually also from Central Alberta. We grew up not that far from each other and had a nice visit. I was like, oh yeah, you know, it'd be nice to think about it for a week. I went off on a trip on a river for a week and thought about it, and she thought about it and came back, and I was kind of like, yeah, I haven't actually really lived anywhere. I've like lived at home and I've drifted a lot, but this feels like a big decision to try and choose roommates. So I don't really know how to do it, but it feels right. And she kind of had the same, like, it feels like it'd be a good fit. When I had come through, it was kind of like, your bed's made. Would you like to move in now or later? And I was like, wow, like,
yeah, well, you're the yes,
so far
you're the yes lady, right?
Yeah,
so
this is so far from my experience down in Nelson trying to get in right now. So yeah, I guess we'll give it a try. Like the ski hill's nice and close. That was one of my one thing I really wanted, because I had never bought ski gear. I'd never owned a pass, so I had only skied a tiny bit because it can be so expensive when you're renting and buying a lift ticket. So I was like, well, it's got a close ski hill and it's got coffee shops and it's got a library and the river is right here. it's a little bit closer to get home than Nelson would have been. So I was like, yeah, this seems like a good start. So we'll give this a try. And it was funny, the summer before that, while I was kind of drifting around, like I had this idea in my head, like, oh, Revy's too hardcore. Like, that's not really me. And I had a weekend of like a coaching course kind of condensed thing that was like 10-hour days for 3 days in a row. And so I needed to be in service, and a friend offered I could stay at her place and do it. So by the end, I was pretty like fired up and really needed to get out of the house. And you know, when you're kind of like that and you're like, well, should I go for a run? Well, it's going to be on pavement at first, so I don't know. Should I get on my bike? And you're like, just walk out the door. Like, you can't make this decision until you get some energy out. So I got on my bike and I kind of biked out the road, which was highway, and was like, oh, there's like a hill here. I'll just start going up the hill a little bit. And it turns out I biked all the way up to this lake called Echo Lake that's kind of out the road from Revelstoke. And it's actually quite a climb. And it was a pretty solid bike ride, but then I just kind of, one more corner, maybe a little further. I'm almost at the lake. I'll just kind of keep going. And then you're out of service. And I got up there and someone's like, wow, did you just bike up here? And I was like, yeah, I just got up here. This is a nice place. I've never been. That's so cool. Do you want a beer? And so I like, I just like, everybody was like, wow, welcome up here. I'm like, that's so great. Yeah, I'd love to stay up here. So chatted with these people, had a beer with them. And then I was like, thank you so much. I really need to go. Like, I meant to be out for like half an hour. It's been an hour and a half now. And I'm out of service. I told my friend I'd cook dinner. Like, I got to get out of here. So I biked back home as quick as I could. And so I go to my friend. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I said I'd cook dinner and you didn't know where I was. Like, that's so rude. And sorry, I just accidentally biked up to Echo Lake. And she's like, Em, you think Revy's too hardcore and you just accidentally biked like whatever the incline was. I was like, right, it's all perspective, right? Like,
Emily's hardcore. So this is a good fit. Revy's a good fit.
Yeah, I'm pretty middle ground for a lot of these sports. I didn't start skiing. I didn't start mountain biking until I was like in my 30s. So there's lots of people that are jumping over top of me when I think I'm doing something cool. But yeah.
That's awesome.
Somehow, like Revy has been the place where it just keeps pulling me back in, and it's interesting because I so value work and I so move around with the guiding and the work I do, and I'm kind of willing to, I love that so much that I'm like, oh yeah, I'll let go of this other thing to come and guide this trip or something that I never worked in Revy. Like, it's funny to me when I was trying to explain like why I'm there, I'm like, it just kind of because it's home, and for a different reason than what home has ever kind of meant to me, of being the place where I live and work. It's like, oh, I just live there. I like being able to wander down by the river, and I've got a decent little, friend connection there, and I do love the ski hill in the winter and guide in the summer. And I was at times working kind of 5 hours in the opposite direction into Alberta, so it kind of was that middle ground and has the things that I like and lots of people that I like and activities that I like. So it's been a pretty good balance.
Yeah. Yay, Revelstoke.
Yeah, yay, Revelstoke. Yeah. But don't tell anyone. Everyone listening, don't come.
Secret.
It's bad.
Yeah. I just would love to hear a little bit about how you developed your combining your love for the outdoors with, I call it inner exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how did that come together?
Like, I've kind of had this business brewing in the background for probably about 5 years now. When I first started coaching and developed my website, and you try and pick a name for a thing you're just starting and you just don't know if it's the right thing, but you're kind of like, I just need to check this box so I can move on to the next part and start doing it more. And Wild Within Coaching came up somehow, and I kept kind of orienting back to like I love that self-exploration, and I love being out on trips, whether they're specifically wilderness therapy or they're personal trips or just a guided river trip. But people just keep coming up with these cool epiphanies of like, oh, this is what's going on, or this is this pattern, or this is what I want to do with my life. And it's always felt like it's not about the trip. Like, it's about where we journey within ourselves on the trip. And yeah, so I kind of come back to like, well, the biggest adventure, like the greatest adventure of our lives, is actually journeying through the wild within more than the wilderness outside. And wilderness therapy was a huge example of that, with kids saying like, wow, I've needed to cry and I just couldn't until I was here. And that space that really invites people into a different area of themselves. And trying to figure out, it's like, well, sometimes it makes sense to offer people services from the comfort of our own home, but really wanting to expand on that area. And it's so great working with Charles at Elements, that he really supports it as well, to be able to
so
combine the paddling.
Elements Adventure Company
Mhm.
is operating out of Lumbee, and you are in partnership.
Yeah, and so I work for Elements as an employee, and then somehow, however we want to call it, we're partnering my vision for that and Charles' support with that to develop paddling retreats, and he already had one. He already had a couples retreat that they were doing, and so he's really given me the opportunity to do what I want to do, which is to take people on a journey really inside themselves by going outside into the wilderness, and I really think that's an environment that can be a really, really fantastic container for the self-work that we might not even know that we need to do, but we feel some level of desire to go and explore that and see what happens.
It's paddling with a purpose. Yeah. Amazing. You've taken us on a great journey today, and I really appreciate all the adventures and your sharing of them. And I don't know, one day maybe we need to sign up.
Yeah, come.
Mother and
Oh,
son.
that'd be fun.
I need a good cry.
Yeah.
Emily, you can make me cry out by a tree or on a river.
Yeah. Cry and then laugh afterwards. And then cycle
Exactly.
repeat.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time and for having me. It's been really lovely.
And we'll be seeing everyone another time on Location with Bowen and Mimi.